I watched a lot of TV as a kid in the 80s and 90s, like obscene amounts. I remember talking to friends at school who were only allowed to watch something like an hour a night, or maybe only watch on the weekend. I was in shock. How could someone possibly survive watching that little TV? How could a parent be so cruel as to force your child to pick and choose which shows to follow instead of just watching them all? Especially with such quality programming on, almost 24/7, pumped into each home mercilessly through a tiny coaxial tube. My obsession with television didn't really start until I got one in my room at around 8 years old. Saturday mornings, I would set an alarm to wake up at 5:30 a.m. to start watching cartoons, and didn't go outside till around 2 or 3 in the afternoon once WWF wrestling had finished. Weekdays, school got in the way for most of the day, but daytime television kind of sucked anyways. I still got in about an hour of morning cartoons before school, and of course, whatever sitcom reruns were on in the evening, like Cheers, Roseanne, or Married with Children, among others. Before the TV in the room days, we had one of those old crappy TVs with the dial on the front of it to change the channel. The dial was made of plastic and would inevitably break off at some point, so you would have a pair of pliers on top of your television to be able to grip what was left of the dial to change the channel. These ancient times were before I was in school. My Baba would watch me weekdays when my parents were at work. Baba and I watched a few shows every day together. She was probably the first person to introduce me to TV, now that I think about it. Two shows I remember in particular. One was The Price is Right back in the Bob Barker days. The second one was none other than The Joy of Painting, starring the legendary Bob Ross. The Joy of Painting is a 30-minute TV show that was hosted by Ross from January 11th, 1983 to May 17th, 1994. The show went 31 seasons and was inspired, if not a carbon copy, of a show called The Magic of Oil Painting, hosted by William Bill Alexander. The Magic of Oil Painting aired from 74 to 82 and was first seen by Bob Ross when he was working as a bartender at some point after he left the military. Bill actually coined the term "happy little tree" years before it became Ross's catchphrase. Bill was born in 1915 in Prussia, which at first kind of sounded to me like a made-up name, but apparently used to be a country and is now part of modern-day Germany. He experienced World War I as a boy and used painting later in life as an escape from some of the horrible memories and scenes he had witnessed. Bill's interest in painting started when a traveling painter visited the small town he lived in and exposed him to the alla prima, or wet-on-wet technique. The traveling painter wasn't even that great at painting, Bill had stated years later in an interview, but he was quick, and he was able to bang out a painting in a matter of minutes. As Bill grew into a young man, he became somewhat of a wandering painter himself, traveling the countryside and painting for small commissions. Bill had to join the German army in World War II, but wasn't much of a soldier, and was soon captured by American forces. Quickly discovering Bill's talent to paint, his captors had him paint portraits of themselves with their loved ones, and they became BFFs. After the war ended, with the encouragement of his new friends, he immigrated to Canada. During the 60s and 70s, Bill slipped back into his old habits of roaming the countryside, this time in a VW van with his wife Margaret. He painted and taught workshops at local malls and community centers in cities and towns all over the place. At some point in the 80s, during his travels, he landed in Florida, taking on an eager student who had seen Bill on TV and was recently out of the military named Bob Ross. Robert Norman Ross was born on October 29, 1942 in Daytona Beach, Florida, but was raised in Orlando. Ross was always an animal lover, and even as a young boy, would care for injured animals he found in the wild, like snakes, armadillos, alligators, and squirrels. It's not really clear if Ross wasn't a great student, or maybe he was the classic too smart for school scenario. Either way, he dropped out of school after grade 9 to work with his father doing carpentry. An unfortunate accident left Ross with part of his index finger missing, which luckily never affected his ability to hold a palette when he painted. In 1961, an 18-year-old Ross enlisted in the Air Force and was put to work as a medical records technician. He rose to the rank of Master Sergeant and served as First Sergeant at Elson Air Force Base in Alaska. Ross fell in love with the Alaskan terrain, using snow and mountains as recurring themes in his paintings. BR's love for painting started at some point during his 20-year service, when he took a few painting courses at Anchorage USO Club, an on-base lounge cafe common area kind of place. He began selling his works of Alaskan landscapes that he painted on novelty gold mining pans. Someone named Jenny Scott claimed on Pinterest they had actually seen one of Bob's pans for sale recently on eBay for around $5,000. Painting whenever Ross was able to find the time on his short work breaks and between shifts, his income from selling paintings eventually surpassed his military income. He retired in his late 30s from the military and moved back to Florida. This was around the time he met Bill Alexander and actually worked for Bill's painting company, traveling, selling painting supplies, and tutoring. A lady named Annette Kowalski was one of Bob's students and was the person who convinced Bob he could make it on his own. Bob and Annette pooled what little money they had and started Bob Ross Incorporated. About 2 years later, the first season of The Joy of Painting was produced by WNVC in Falls Church, Virginia. The first season of The Joy of Painting only aired on PBS stations, mostly on the East Coast, so the initial audience was pretty small. It was the only season that played background music when Ross painted, and the only season he wore glasses. Season 2 and onward was produced in Muncie, Indiana by WIPB and was shot in real time with 2 cameras, one for a wide shot as well as another for close-up shots of the canvas and the palette. Ross created 3 versions of each painting. The first version he painted prior to recording the show, which sat off camera as kind of a guide or template. After the show, he would paint a third, more detailed version of the painting for use in his instructional books. None of the paintings done on the show were ever sold. Some were donated to PBS stations, some are featured in an exhibit in the Smithsonian Institute next to works by Mr. Rogers and Julia Child. Most are in a warehouse at Bob Ross Incorporated HQ in Herndon, Virginia, as shown in the New York Times video from 2019 entitled, "Where Are All the Bob Ross Paintings?" JFP used the same theme music in the intro for 30 of the 31 seasons. Season 1 didn't have any music and just kind of jumped right into it with no official intro. The theme song for the show was composed and performed by Larry Muhoberac, who also was known as aliases Larry Owens and Larry Gordon for some reason. Maybe an attempt at a catchier last name. Anyways, Muhoberac was most famous for being the original keyboardist for Elvis Presley's TCP band. TCP stood for Taking Care of Business, which was a personal motto Elvis adopted at some point in his career. Larry played with Elvis in 1969 at the Hotel International debut in Las Vegas and did 1 tour before being replaced for unknown reasons. Muhoberac collaborated with a ton of heavy hitters in the biz, including Neil Diamond, Tina Turner, Ray Charles, and Barbra Streisand. The Joy of Painting struggled at first, and it's rumored Ross was so broke he couldn't even afford a haircut, which was the reason for his giant fro that he would become so well known for. Ross came out with his own line of painting supplies he promoted through the show, as well as instructional videos and such. Eventually, Bob Ross Incorporated grew into a $15 million business. At this point, his hairdo had become part of the company logo, so he had no choice but to keep the fro. During each show, he wore the same outfit, jeans and a button-down shirt, which he thought would be a timeless look. In 2014, the blog 538 analyzed 381 episodes of The Joy of Painting, concluding that 91% of Ross's paintings contained at least one tree. 44% included clouds, 39% included mountains, and 34% included mountain lakes. Ross had estimated at some point he had completed more than 30,000 paintings in his lifetime. Ross passed away on the 4th of July, 1995, at 52 years old from complications of lymphoma. His remains are buried at Woodlawn Memorial Park in Gotha, Florida. Ross's diagnosis was not known to the public until after his death, and Bob Ross Incorporated was left to Annette Kowalski, who believed in him during those humble beginnings. Bob Ross Incorporated still exists today in Herndon, Virginia, and you can get a hold of them at 1-800-BOB-ROSS. They accept all sorts of calls. If you want to order some Bob Ross merch, have a question about painting, or even just to chat to someone about how much you love the show. Bob always wanted to be a symbol of happiness, and Bob Ross Incorporated helps keep that dream alive. Bob's legacy has dwarfed his 10 years on PBS, and he has become a part of pop culture, with likenesses or imitations of him on Family Guy, Deadpool 2, and a bunch of DIY parodies. Bob has been in an MTV commercial and an episode of Bill Nye the Science Guy. There is a Bob Ross Chia Pet, and were even plans for a Bob Ross video game for the Nintendo Wii and DS, which never actually came to light. In 2015, all 31 seasons of The Joy of Painting were added to the Bob Ross YouTube channel, and several seasons have been available here and there on Netflix and other streaming services. Ross is amazing. A true symbol of hard work and sticking to what you love and what you believe in. Proof that for some of us, life doesn't start till your 40s. That it doesn't matter if you have a career for 20 years, you can still hit the reset button and take a shot at doing something you truly love with your life, as opposed to just punching a time clock. Ross had said once he left the Army, he would never raise his voice again for anything. I feel what he really meant is he would only be the person he wanted to be from that day forward. He finally had enough of playing along, and he wanted to play his own game where he gets to make the rules. We miss you, Bob. You are an inspiration, and thanks for all the happy little trees. Oh!